To say the 2K franchise has dominated the scene of basketball video game wise is kind of an understatement. 2K has dominated this scene for over a decade and a half. They have knocked out any form of competition they could possibly have, to the point where now they're the only basketball game we've had within the past 6 or something years. And despite how you might feel about 2K, I mean, they kind of earned that spot. They had a lot of competition throughout the early 2000s, man. That whole street ball movement really impacted the video game world. The N1, Street Hoops, NBA Ballers, I list them all off in the last video. But despite all those gimmick basketball games made throughout the PS2 era, the biggest and some would say only competition they really had was NBA Live. Much like 2K, NBA Live was a simulation style basketball game that replicated each year's season of basketball in video game form. Just like 2K, we got a yearly release for different consoles. Unlike 2K, however, Live did it first. 2K's the popular thing now, and it's been like that for a while, but NBA Live came first. While 2K started in '99, Live started in '94. And throughout the early 2000s, they competed back to back with yearly releases of basketball games. Each year, players choosing whether to play Live or 2K. Some people picked both. This competition, however, ended in 2009 when NBA Live released NBA Live 10. Now, some people consider this probably one of the best, if not the best, NBA Live game of all time. It was definitely a step up from '09. It might not have had dunk contests like earlier NBA Live games, but it was still a very solid game. And you would think that the follow-up to that would be just as good. Unfortunately, they stopped after 10. They were supposed to release NBA Elite 11, however, it was canceled before it was released. And after that, man, 2K soared. They kept going while NBA Live stopped, and we didn't get another NBA Live until 2013, 4 years later with NBA Live 14. Now, with their return, there was a lot of expectations, because now they're in the next generation of consoles. They've been gone for 4 years, but now they're back, and they're back to give 2K competition. And they stayed for a few years after that. We had NBA Live 14, 15, 16, they skipped 17, released 18, but their initial return was with NBA Live 14. And it did not get a lot of good reactions. It wasn't as good as NBA Live 10 in my opinion. And in the opinion of others, it wasn't a good return. Which kind of hurt them even more in the long run after already taking a break, because it's bad enough you left, but when you come back, you return with this shit. While the competition, NBA 2K, just released NBA 2K14. Their first game in the next generation of consoles. And that game was fucking solid. The gameplay, the graphics, the soundtrack, and the introduction of Park. All of those together washed NBA Live 14. And it continued on like that for the next, what, 2 or 3 years? 15, 16, and 18 couldn't compete against 2K 15, 16, and 18. Well, no, maybe, no, NBA Live 18 probably could compete with 2K 18. But 15 and 16 was not winning that. 2K surpassed them. Between the 4-year break, the bad releases, and the domination of 2K, NBA Live had fallen from grace. Now, despite all this, I can say that even though they had fallen from grace, I believe they left off on a really good note with their last release of NBA Live 19. Much like its predecessors, NBA Live 19 was a simulation-style basketball game released on September of 2018 and is the last NBA Live game released. Now, unlike, let's say, 14 or 15, Live 19 received a lot of favorable reviews, or more so, it's looked back on a lot more fondly than the previous NBA Lives. Everything was improved drastically in comparison. The gameplay, the multiplayer, the presentation. Live 19, in my opinion, was a really good basketball game. So much so that I don't understand why it didn't get a continuation. I don't remember them receiving that many bad reviews to the point where they couldn't release 20. And unlike their first break, there wasn't any news of them coming out with a 20. When NBA Live left after 10, we were supposed to get other ones like NBA Live 11 or NBA Live 13. It's just that they were canceled. After after 19 released, NBA Live basically fell off the face of the earth. No news, no updates, no nothing. They kept the game alive during their cycle with updates and different events, but as time went on, they stopped, leaving us with NBA Live 19 6 years later. NBA Live 19 had a lot of good features, really fun gameplay, a lot of bad features as well. We're gonna get into all that. I'm going to explain my experience playing NBA Live 19 when it first dropped and even now, especially now. And I'ma see if I can come to an understanding of why we didn't get a 20. NBA Live 19 follows the basketball season of 2018 with the entire roster of the 2018 season at your disposal. Now, something I was a little worried about coming back to NBA Live 19 was to see how outdated everything was, not necessarily the roster, but more so the gameplay. Because I remember at the time, I felt like NBA Live 19 was a bit of a slower version of its counterpart 2K19, and it kind of is, but not in a bad way. The gameplay works really well. It's just, if you jump from, let's say, a 2K19 to a Live, you will notice the difference in speed when it comes to dribbling, sprinting, shooting. But I think the highlight of all of it is the defense system. The defense system in Live 19 is perfect. You know how I said in my 2K24 video, I felt like there was a difference in balance between perimeter defense and post offense? In Live 19, it feels balanced in both offense and defense. The way they decided to do defense in Live is there is a trigger system where if you're guarding somebody and they're about to move either left or right or dribble left and right, there are indicators on your player icon that lets you know what direction they're moving in. You need to match the pace of those directions in order to successfully box out your opponent. Now, if you hit those indicators in the same fashion as your opponent, you will not only box them out, but you will also have a window to steal the ball. But you gotta do it quick. You know, if you wait too long, you fuck up and then your opponent blows by you. If you hit it just right, you can get the ball from their hands and blow by them. Now, if you don't hit the indicators correctly, there is no steal option and your opponent will just blow by you without remorse. It's a fun mini game, but it's also a really good way to balance out the defense and the offense, gameplay wise. It's also pretty fun on the offensive side because you know that the opponent is going to get an indicator depending on which direction that you go. So on the offense side, you're left creating different combos to trip out your opponent. I really love the defense system in Live 19, and if they do decide to come back with a 26 or 7, because they ain't releasing shit this year, I do hope they bring it back. Now, speaking of offense, the offense system in this game is interesting. Now, the way I just big up the defense, I'm gonna give offenses props too, but there are a couple things I noticed. I feel like in this game, you need to rely heavily more on driving to the rim rather than 3-point or even 2-point shots. Layups and dunks are your friends. Not saying you can't shoot from the 3-point line. You can. The game, no matter what difficulty you play on, gives you more than enough of a window to make a 3-point shot if you're open. It's just, I feel like it's easier to get a point off layups and dunks than shooting. But that's more so due to the fact that there's not that much difficulty or consequence for people who do drive to the rim. We're gonna get into that a little more later because that's its own little category. But as for the shooting though, the AI really does a good job at making you work for it. There will be small windows of opportunity for you to be open for too long to make a shot. Like if you're on one side of the court and you're rushing to the other and then you pass the ball to another person who just so happens to be open because they're ahead of everybody else, the AI will rush to that person to stop them from shooting, which as they fucking should, right? It's a basketball game. What I'm trying to say is I believe that the AI is a lot more aware. Like the second you see one of your teammates is open, you need to immediately pass them the ball and they basically need to like immediately shoot, because if they don't, or if you don't, if you're catching the ball, the AI is on your ass. But as I said, I feel like that's more of a difficulty for shooting. Driving is a whole nother thing. Not to say that the AI doesn't react to you when you're driving to the hoop, because they do, but Like I said, that's a whole nother thing that we're going to save for later. Now, shooting and defense aside, another thing I want to talk about is the dribbling. If you go, remember how I said if you go from 2K19 or whatever to NBA Live 19, you'll notice a difference in speed? Well, you kind of immediately notice that with the dribbling. Now, dribbling in NBA Live 19, in my opinion, is exactly the same as 2K19. You rely heavily on your right stick, and if you hold down the right trigger while moving R stick, you can do a whole nother section of dribble moves. Now, what separates the two, as I said, is speed. If you play 2K19 and NBA Live 19 back-to-back dribble-wise, you'll see that in 19, it's a lot more slippery and slidey. There's way more arm movement than there is leg movement. A lot more sliding and sidestepping in comparison to NBA Live 19, which is a lot more grounded. It's very boots to the ground, a lot of foot movement. It's slower in comparison. You don't move around the court as fast as you would in 2K19, but in comparison, it is a lot more realistic. The controls might be the same as one another, but the execution and visual appearance of them are very different. Now, as I said in my 2K24 video, I'm not no dribble demigod. I've never claimed to be. In fact, I actually kind of suck. But for the people who are, and you know, if you're a strict 2K player and you jump to NBA Live 19, don't expect to just left right out of a scenario every time. Due to Live 19's counter system, it's a lot harder to mix up your opponent in comparison to 2K. But if you know enough of the dribble combinations and are successful at chaining them together, you'll also be successful at mixing up your opponent. And if you ever feel like you need to practice or improve on said combinations, or even defense or shooting in general, you can practice in the drills and scrimmage section of the game, or you can just freestyle it in your personal court. Kind of like how 2K has 2KU for its own section of tutorials and practice runs, NBA Live has the same thing. You can either practice your jump shot in the shoot around section, practice drills to use on the court, or play scrimmage. It's all up to you. Now, diving a little more into the offline section of the game, the outside of the play now or the scrimmages and the drills, if you ever feel like doing something different outside of that, you can play franchise mode. Now, franchise mode is when you select one team from the roster and play a virtual season of basketball. You stick with this team throughout the entire season and you work your way through the entire roster in order to win a championship. I really enjoyed franchise mode. Modes like franchise mode is necessary in a basketball game. Select a team, play through a season, win a championship. But I think the main thing I liked about it was how it was presented. In franchise mode, you don't just play as the team, you can also evolve it and upgrade it. You know how in my career, you start off a certain overall and you have certain attributes and you get certain badges and points as you play throughout the story? It's the same thing with franchise mode, except you do it with the entire roster. Let's say you're playing a game. You have control over the entire team. Depending on how long you play with a player or how good you play with them, you will be granted attribute points. Now, once the game's over, you use said points to upgrade certain abilities each player has. Now, everyone, well, at least the starting lineup, always gets points at the end of the game, but the people who you played with the longest get the most. You can use the attribute points to improve on some of your players' weaknesses, or you can use them to further improve their strengths. It's really up to you. Either way, you're free to level up each player in your team however way you want. It's a fun feature. You can track what's going on in the basketball world through the news / social media section of the game. You can strengthen your team by trading with other players from other teams in the NBA. Now, the trades have to be specific though. Like, you have to match the pricings and the interest rate. You still have to make it fair. You can't fucking trade, I don't know, someone on the bench for Russell Westbrook or Kawhi Leonard. You gotta be smart. Nonetheless, the teams you trade with or the teams you trade for, it's all up to you. Another thing I liked, and this just isn't a franchise mode thing, it's an in general thing, is the presentation of the game. Whether it's the halftime show or the after game report, everything is really like ESPN sponsored. Actually, the whole presentation of the game is basically ESPN. Like, they show you everything. Player of the game, who was hot, who was cold, who scored the most points during the first half of the game, who scored the least during the second half. They show the highlights of both teams and the game track. It does a good job at making you feel like you're actually there watching a game of basketball on TV. And in my opinion, it works even better with franchise mode. It's one thing to put two random teams together and play now and then watch the halftime show. It is immersive, but it's another thing to play franchise mode. You're playing a season of basketball while having it presented to you like an actual show. The commentary can be a little repetitive, but nonetheless, I really enjoyed the presentation of not just franchise mode, but the game as a whole. Now, I will say the downside to franchise mode, I don't want to make it seem like it's better than what it is, because realistically, when you're actually playing it, it's kind of bland. Like, I expected something so much more than what I was given. Like, this game feels like a glorified season mode. It's not as customizable as I wanted it to be. You editing players' attribute points is cool and making trades is cool, but I wanted a lot more. I wanted to be able to customize jerseys, you know, customize shoes. I wanted the commentary team to feel like they're commentating a season rather than just a game. Like, you know how cool it would be if, I don't know, 10 games into the season, they discuss your progression through the season by bringing up other teams you guys faced or other players specifically. I guess I wanted to be more aware. Like, at times it just feels pointless. Like, I'm glad it's in the game, you know, variety and all that. It's just, I wish they put more effort into it. Like, some of these game modes, specifically franchise mode, feel like they took less time on it to focus on the one career mode. Like, they focus more on the multiplayer aspect than the offline aspect. And I'm not saying that it's not fun to play, because it is. It's a fun game overall. It's just, you can tell where they put most of their efforts at when you pick this game up. Now, speaking of where they put most of their efforts, I want to talk about the online section of the game. Specifically, the One. So, the One for NBA Live 19 is basically Live's version of My Career. You create your own personalized player, and you use said personalized player to play out a story mode. Now, I really enjoyed the way they did their story. You can either pursue a career as a world-known street baller, or you can go to the league and play a season of the NBA. But before you do either of that, you need to play The Rise. The Rise is basically where you begin your career as a basketball player. You play pickup games of basketball in the streets, and you work your way up the ladder until you get world-known fame. Now, with The Rise, you start at the Kawhi 54 basketball competition, the one that was up in Paris. Beautiful arena. And us as the player, we are competing in this competition against another group of street ballers. Now, after the match is over, apparently we played so well that we began to become recognized across social media. We got a buzz around our name. Now, to expand that buzz, after talking with our mentor through text, we are given the option to go to either the Philippines or South Asia. Me personally, I pick South Asia, and thus our journey to become one of the most legendary street ballers continues. Now, something I actually didn't like about this is this game at this point in the story did a lot of telling and not showing. Now, once you pick the destination, your character proceeds to go through a year-long journey all across South Asia playing the best of the best basketball players. The issue with that is the game, rather than letting you play throughout that year, or at least taking gaps within that year that you can play through, they just tell you. They use cutscenes of people on social media and different basketball platforms explaining your journey throughout this past year, all the while leading to your final stop. Like, you got people saying, oh my god, the past year he's been dominating the street ball scene, and the whole time I'm watching like, damn, I wish I got to see it. Like, they didn't even give you an option, they just made it a whole cutscene. Nonetheless, you finally get to the last stop of your journey. You need to play one final game of street ball in South Asia and win in order to return back home. Now, obviously we win, and when we come back home, we are tasked with playing another game of basketball at our home court. And that leads to another thing I liked about the game. It gives you the option to customize your very own private court that you can use outside of online. It's called One Court, and you have full range to customize it however way you want. The layout, the images, everything. Now, kind of like franchise mode, I wish they did a little bit more with the court customization. Like, they gave us more things to add to it. Like, me personally, I wanted the option to have a court outside. That could just be me being picky, but still, I think they could have added a little more to it. And like I said, it's not just an online feature. You can use it online in court battles, or you can use it offline to just shoot around. Great addition to the game. Now, the Rise run is kind of short-lived. It's not too much of a story mode. It's more so like an intro. Throughout the Rise, you get to play other basketball players at their own home court. It's kind of like NBA Street Home Court. You play a series of games, and eventually you get to the quote-unquote final boss, which is another NBA player, and you battle them at their own court. Now, once you complete the Rise, that's when you're open to play game modes like World Tour and League. This is when the two stories thing kind of kicks in. On one side, you have World Tour. You and a collection of basketball players that you create throughout the game, or basketball players that you unlock, you all go on this world tour. You battle other players, other teams across the world, all the while doing it in real life street ball courts. You can play through Dykeman, Rucker Park. You go to basketball courts in Canada, basketball courts in Europe, and you can even go through the Quai 54 arena. And it's also kind of arena based. Once you complete the first sections of arenas and home courts, then you move on to the next. In order for you to unlock the next, you have to play through a certain amount of games and arenas. And each arena in this game looks beautiful. My personal favorite is the Hoop Dome Arena up in Toronto. The fact that EA managed to go around and get each and every court done right is very impressive. It legit feels like a street ball world tour. You travel to one town, play the best of the best players over there, beat them, move on to the next. Kind of like the And1 street ball tour back in the day. Going around city to city, state to state, fighting the best of the best players. And through each arena, you get a series of awards, whether it be clothes, jerseys, accessories, or other players. This game mode is very rewarding. The game itself is very rewarding, and I'll have to say this is probably my favorite game mode out of the entire game. Now, the second story is the League. With the League, rather than going the street ball route, you go the NBA route. In order for you to go into the League, you need to play a pickup game in order for you to get drafted. How well you play will dictate what number draft pick you get. So you better play your ass off if you want to get on the team that you want. Now, after you play the game, this is where the game does the whole telling not showing thing I said a minute ago, where now you have the draft season after you play the draft game. And how they did it is they have one big screen, they have an announcer announcing all the draft picks between like 1 and 30, and they go through each section like a slideshow. Like, okay, draft pick number 1 for the Phoenix Suns is such and such. Draft pick number 2 for the Boston Celtics is such and such. And they do that until you get to your number. It's actually kind of boring. Now, they did try to, make an effort. They pitched in crowd noises and they did give an announcer. But even then, once they get to us, I mean, everything's just silent. They just hand it to us and then just leave. As I said, boring. Once you get drafted to whatever team you're on, you're free to play the season. And actually, before I forget, a funny thing is, I got traded to the Phoenix Suns. I didn't want to be on the Suns. I was immediately asked if I wanted to be traded somewhere else. I decided that I wanted to be traded to the Celtics, and the trade happened literally like immediately. The same second I was drafted to the Suns, I was then drafted to the Boston Celtics. So like, what was the point of the draft then if I can just pick whatever team I wanted to play on? Or maybe it's because the Celtics weren't doing that good that year and so their interest rates were kind of low. I don't know. Either way, I got to play on the team I wanted. Now, from that point on, you and the team of your choice are free to play the rest of the season of basketball until you get to the very ending and win the season. Or lose, it depends on how good you play. They put a lot of time and effort into the one portion of the game, and I can tell. I really enjoyed it. I will say this, man, and 2K falls under this category too. I'm tired of them and these cheesy ass names. I mean, come on, The One. I didn't explain that earlier, but the reason why it's called The One is because you play such great basketball. You're such an amazing street ball player that everyone on social media, including basketball commentators, go out their way to call you The One. It's corny as hell. Me personally, I would have came up with a different name. Like, I don't know, if you want to give him a nickname, call him Prodigy or Genesis or whatever the hell. And 2K is another one, man. I mean, come on, MP. It wasn't in one of the games, it was AI. Or better yet, I think it was 2K20, they called him Shay. I don't even know what that shit's short for. These names, man, I don't know, they need work. Not that big of an issue to me though, to whereas I can enjoy the game. Which, another thing I like, you know, the whole nickname thing aside, the presentation of The One gameplay, or the presentation of The One story, is very well done. You notice how I said earlier, the game is very ESPN inspired. You know, they have the halftime show and the after game reports. They kind of do the same thing with this one. That shit's there too. I mean, if you're playing the league, that is. But after each game, you know, especially the street ball games, there is a news section where they hire someone from Complex or even Stephen A. Smith to detail the actions or the events that happened in the previous game. You know, that's their version of telling the story. They have real life commentators, basketball commentators, come on the game and explain the progress and journey of The One. And I was very impressed with it. They weren't animated in, it wasn't a text-to-speech thing, it was them in their office, in their background, commentating on the story. Basketball commentators, YouTubers, internet influencers, everyone there in their own backgrounds and environments, doing what they do in real life, commentating on sports. Very, very well done. Now, the rest of your interactions with other people, man, that shit's done through phone. They love doing the whole text message thing. They did the same thing in College Football 25. Like, after you create a player, you can speak to your mentor or other basketball players through text messages. Custom made, obviously. Now onto the bad parts of this game, the things I don't like. So earlier in the video, I said that this game favors driving to the rim more than they do shooting, right? I said I was saving that for later. This is later. The reason why I said that is because, and this is my biggest gripe with the game has a very bad tendency of holding your hand. At times it's too damn easy. Like, there's no such thing as being contested in this game when you get close enough to the rim. Not saying that it's not there. If you are like really on your opponent and you're dead in front of him, stopping his shots, like blocking him, towering over him, it's gonna work, but you can be guarded by 2 people, 3 people. The second you get under that the second you get under the rim, you're making the shot. You will make shots that you know damn well you were not supposed to make because the game is really inconsistent with their contested meter. With shooting, it's not like that. If you're wide open, you can make it without an issue. But if someone is in front of you, yeah, it's obviously a lot more fucking difficult. That makes sense. Contested with shooting makes sense. It's just the driving that's the issue. Like, the AI tries to put up a fight if you're driving, but once you get underneath the hoop, it's all over. There's like, it doesn't matter what difficulty you put the game on. Like, me personally, I play on Superstar. I think the highest is Hall of Fame. It doesn't matter if you're playing Superstar, Hall of Fame, or Rookie. When you get under that hoop, you're hitting that shit. The only time I've ever really missed a shot under the hood is if I got like too cocky and underestimated the distance I was from the hoop, or if another player was towering over me and just smacked the ball out of my hand. The AI does not do that well on defense once you're driving. Like, I'm telling you, play NBA Live 19. You're gonna see what I'm saying. It goes out of its way to kind of coddle you at times. And it's not like it doesn't go both ways, because it does. It's not selective with who they allow to do it. Everyone is capable of doing it. You can do it, the other players can do it, the AI can do it. Once you get past that 3-point line, there's not that much difficulty. That's really the main gripe I have with the game. At times it's way too easy. And now that I think about it, I think I kind of went over some of my other issues with the game. I talked about the lack of creativity with franchise mode, about how bland it is. I talked about the game's bad habit of telling and not showing during the one career mode. Talked about the lack of difficulty in driving. Yeah, that's basically the main gripes I have with the game. At times it's too easy. They didn't do enough with the franchise mode, and they could have done a little bit more with Rise. One more thing before I dip, because I realized I didn't really talk about the online as much as I think I did. The actual online portion of this game is actually still alive 6 years later. Yeah, despite this game coming out in 2018, the servers are still up and it's alive and well. It's called Live Run. That's where you can go on the 3v3 section, the 5v5 section. That's where all the online action is. There's also court battles where you can battle other players in their courts, or they can battle you in yours, but it's not really as alive as Live Run. I haven't really played a game of one court this year, of court battles this year, I'm sorry. Live Run, however, is still popping. Now on Live Run, you can have 3v3s, 5v5s between you and your friends, or you and randoms against other people. Now, out of the 6 people between the 3v3 or the 10 people between the 5v5, you have one host. Said host can select whichever venue they want to play in. There's 14 venues that you can play on against other people. It's very matchmaking based. It's not like 2K where they had Neighborhood at the time, or Park. Everything about multiplayer is matchmaking. You and random people go up against another group of random people in a random selection of maps. Then it works for them. I mean, they can't fucking rip off 2K with the Neighborhood or the Park idea. Well, they could. I mean, shit, who's gonna stop them? But instead, they came up with their own idea. It might not be as immersive as Park or Neighborhood, but it does what it's supposed to do. I can't think of too many times where I was playing Live 19 online and my game crashed. I don't think it ever crashed. The servers worked fine, internet connection was fine. Now, just like any other basketball game, you do kind of have to worry sometimes about playing with randoms, because you might have that one person who thinks he's the main character and hogs the fucking ball. But other than those few occasions, the online portion works fine. It's also very rewarding. The game itself is very fucking rewarding. If you lose, you get like 1250 VC. If you win, you can get 250 or even 3K, depending on how well you play. And rather than using the VC in that one to upgrade your player, you only really use it to buy clothes and gear. In order for you to upgrade your player, you get skill points, which is basically rewards you after every game you play. You have this whole catalog of different points and attributes that you can upgrade using skill points that are divided in category, like dribbling, 3-point, inside shot, contested shot. You can upgrade all these abilities through skill points. There's also a badge system, well, trait system. They don't call it badges, they call them traits. Like how 2K has badges that improve certain abilities like dribbling or defense or shooting, Live has traits. You can get traits that improve your ability of making a shot after shooting, after receiving the ball, traits that improve your stamina and fatigue, traits that improve your dribbling. The traits play a really big portion of upgrading your player, because unlike the badge system, the traits actually do affect your overall. If you can get your traits high enough, or you have a good combination of traits, you can bump up your overall by a good 3 or 4 points. Actually, I think you can bump it up to at least 6 or 7 more. The traits go from bronze to silver to gold. The longer you play the game with said trait attached to it, the more you can upgrade it through rank. Same thing with the icon ability. When you create your character, you kind of base them off of an ongoing NBA player or WNBA player. So whatever their specialties are, they will become your specialties. In the same way you unlock skill points to raise your attributes with dribbling or shooting, is the same way that you kind of unlock XP in order to rank up your icon system. The more XP you get, the more abilities you achieve. It's just that simple. All in all, I really like this game. I think it was really fucking solid. Now, if I were to compare it to 2K19, if you were to ask me if I believe this was the better game, no. As much as I loved NBA Live 19, 2K19 was the way better game. Well, let me put it to you like this. There's things that Live 19 did better than 2K19, and there's things that 2K19 did better than Live 19. But the reason why I'm saying 2K19 was the better game was, for starters, I mean, come on, 2K19's roster blew Live 19's out the water. While Live 19 had the current roster of the NBA season, 2K19 had that and rosters from previous years. There was an option for you to choose between the current NBA stars or classic stars, ranging from NBA teams from 64 all the way up to like 2014. There was also the all-time roster, where you basically play as the all-time greatest basketball players from certain teams, all mixed in together throughout multiple years. So technically, 2K19 kind of gave you like 3 different rosters to play with. Now, if I were to compare Blacktop to World Tour, I do think World Tour was better because of the multiple different street ball venues that they had. Now, gameplay, that's very debatable. But as I said, each game had its ups and its downs. 2K19 had the better roster. Live 19 was better when it came to street ball. 2K19's dribbling was a little more arcadey. Live 19's dribbling was a little more realistic. 2K19 was really good when it focused on offense, but I think Live 19 was better when it came to defense. However, the roster size itself, along with My Career and Neighborhood, I think 2K19 just gave you so much content that you kind of have to pick it over Live 19. Nonetheless, both solid games. Great year for both teams. This video has gone on long enough. It's pushing on, what, 35 minutes? I'm gonna go. I hope y'all enjoyed this episode of Reggie TV. Tell me what y'all think. Did y'all think NBA Live 19 was better than 2K19? Did you think 2K19 was better than Live? How do y'all feel? Also, why do y'all think that we didn't get NBA Live 20? Because the way this game was built, I thought we were gonna get a sequel. It was a solid game. Nonetheless, hope y'all enjoyed it. See y'all in the next one. I'm out.